Hey everyone. Thank you for joining the Unveiled family. We're almost halfway to our goal, and it's all thanks to you. If you haven't yet, please smash that subscribe button so that we can hit 1,000 subs together. Let's do this. I never thought a dating app would mess me up like that. You hear about weird stories online, but you never really think you'll be one of those people. I mean, you swipe, you chat, you meet, maybe it's awkward, maybe it's cool, but it's never supposed to get dark like this. I guess I was wrong, so I matched with this girl named Nikki. Her profile looked normal enough, few selfies, her dog, some coffee shop photos, a quote that made no sense but sounded deep. I wasn't expecting much. We started talking and she was, honestly, pretty funny, kind of sarcastic, but not mean. She had these green eyes that looked like she was always in on some secret, and I'm not gonna lie, she was gorgeous. Like the kind of girl who looks like she belongs in one of those influencer ads for skincare or whatever. We went on a few dates, mostly just coffee or late night drives, nothing too serious. She always wanted to go somewhere low-key, nothing crowded. First couple weeks were actually pretty cool. She asked a lot of questions about me, almost too many sometimes. Like really personal stuff that you don't usually talk about that early. But I figured she just wanted to get to know me. It felt kinda nice, having someone that interested. Things started getting weird around the third week we were hanging out at her apartment one night, watching some weird documentary she picked. She was sitting way too close, looking at me like she was studying my face. Then, out of nowhere, she starts talking about my height. I'm not super tall, but I'm not short either. I told her that. She kind of laughed and said, "Yeah, but imagine if you were like a few inches taller." I brushed it off, thought she was joking, but she wasn't joking. The next few days she kept bringing it up, like it was this casual thing. She'd send me links to these stupid articles about limb lengthening surgeries. I thought she was just messing around, but she was dead serious. She even texted me one morning saying she booked us a consultation with some doctor downtown. I laughed it off and said I wasn't going. She didn't respond for hours. When she finally did, it was this super long message about how she just wanted me to reach my full potential. Her words, not mine. I should have stopped seeing her right there, but I didn't. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought she'd drop it. Maybe I didn't want to deal with the awkward breakup. Either way, I kept hanging out with her. Then she leveled it up. We're at this restaurant one night, and she randomly starts talking about guys with better packages. I was like, seriously? She smiles like it's no big deal, and says she'll read about some procedure that can enhance that area too. I'm sitting there, staring at my plate, wondering if this is some kind of prank. But no, she's dead serious. Again, she even said she looked up a surgeon that could do both procedures. Back. I remember feeling kinda sick in that moment. Like, who does that? Who tells their boyfriend they should get taller and bigger? Who even thinks like that? But she said it with this soft, sweet voice, like she was suggesting a new haircut or something. The messed up part is, she made it sound like it was all for me. Like she was helping me become the best version of myself. And for a second, I almost bought into it. She was that convincing. But something inside me kept tugging at my gut, telling me this was all kinds of wrong. Couple days later, she picks me up and says, "We're just going for a drive." We end up outside some fancy building that looks like a private clinic. She parks and smiles like we're about to go get ice cream or something. Says we should just talk to the doctor. No commitment. Just talk. I told her I didn't want to go in. She got real quiet. Stared straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight, her knuckles turned white. After a few minutes of silence, she calmly says that if I cared about our future, I'd at least hear him out. I don't even know how she flipped it like that, guilt-tripping me like I was the problem. I sat there, feeling trapped, like if I didn't go in, I'd lose her. So I followed her inside. The clinic was way too clean, like hospital clean. Everything smelled like disinfectant. Receptionist smiled like this was all normal. Nikki held my hand the whole time, whispering that everything was gonna be okay. We sat in this cold office while some middle-aged guy in a suit came in with charts and pictures and diagrams. He talked about bone segments, rods, recovery times, nerve risks, all this stuff that made my skin crawl. Then he casually shifts into the second part. The enhancement, like it's some package deal they sell. Nikki kept squeezing my hand like she was reassuring me, but I couldn't even feel my fingers anymore. My head was spinning. I didn't know whether to throw up or run. I kept nodding, pretending to listen, but I wasn't really there. When we left, she was glowing, like she just got promoted or something. Said how proud she was of me for being open-minded. I barely spoke on the ride home. When she dropped me off, she kissed me like nothing was wrong. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything. How did I even get here? How did she get in my head like that? This wasn't normal. This wasn't love. It was like she wanted to build some version of me that only existed in her head. The next morning, I texted her that I couldn't do this. I told her I was done. I half expected her to beg or yell, but she just replied with okay. That was it. No emotion, no fight, just okay. Few days later, I blocked her on everything. But even now, sometimes I wonder how many other guys she's done this to. How many dudes out there sat in that same cold office while she squeezed their hand, whispering it was for the best. If you're reading this and think it can't happen to you, trust me, it can. It starts with a few compliments, a few harmless suggestions. Then one day you're sitting across from a doctor holding a chart about how to snap your legs in half for a few extra inches. I met Jerome on this random Wednesday night. My friend Amber and I were at this small diner after a study group, just killing time and complaining about school. It wasn't even supposed to be a night out or anything. We were both in sweatpants, hair tied up, no makeup, the usual I don't care look. That's probably why it caught me off guard when Jerome walked in. He had this confidence about him, not the arrogant kind, but like he knew exactly who he was. Tall, clean-cut, nice sneakers, and that kind of casual swagger you only see in movies. He caught my eye a couple times while ordering at the counter, and before I knew it, he was sitting at our booth, chatting us up like we'd known him for years. It didn't feel forced. He was funny, charming, had these intense dark eyes that made you forget what you were saying halfway through a sentence. After about 20 minutes, Amber made some excuse to leave, clearly picking up on the vibe. I stayed. We talked for another hour. He told me he was in real estate, doing property flips, investing all the stuff that sounds fancy but vague enough to believe. He had a nice car parked outside too. Not flashy, but you could tell it cost more than my entire year of tuition. By the time I got home that night, we'd already exchanged numbers. I lay in bed replaying the conversation, smiling like an idiot. He seemed different from the guys I usually dated. Older, more mature, like he had his life together. After a few months of swiping through the usual losers on dating apps, Jerome felt like a breath of fresh air. The first couple weeks were great. He always picked me up, paid for everything, opened doors like some old-school gentleman. We went to nice restaurants, little jazz clubs, and once even drove out of the city just to watch the sunset from some overlook he knew. He never pressured me to do anything. He made me feel safe, like I could trust him with anything. But there were little things that started to feel off. He never let me pick him up from his place. Every time I asked, he'd say his apartment was being renovated or his cousin was crashing on his couch. Whenever his phone rang, he'd step outside to answer it. He always had cash on him, like a ridiculous amount. And there were times he'd cancel plans last minute, saying he had business to take care of. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone has their secrets, right? I figured maybe he had some family stuff going on or some private financial situation he didn't want to talk about. I wasn't going to pry. Then one night, everything changed. We were supposed to go out for dinner, but he called me to meet him at this apartment complex across town. He said he had to handle something real quick. When I got there, the place was nothing like where I imagined Jerome living. It was one of those rundown buildings with broken mailboxes and flickering hallway lights. The whole vibe was sketchy. I waited in my car for a bit, debating whether to text him that I was outside. Before I could, I saw him come out of one of the side doors with two guys following behind him. They were carrying duffel bags, looking around like they didn't want to be seen. Jerome handed something to one of them. It looked like a wad of cash, and they all shook hands before the two guys walked off. I froze. I didn't know what I had just seen, but it didn't look like real estate business to me. My stomach, twisted eyes stayed parked there, trying to make sense of it, but then Jerome spotted my car. He walked over, cool as always, got in the passenger seat like nothing had happened. He acted like we were still going to dinner. I played along, my head spinning. The whole ride I kept thinking about those bags, the cash, the way those guys were looking around nervously. None of it added up. A few days later, things started to unravel fast. Jerome became harder to reach. His texts got short, and sometimes he wouldn't respond for hours. When we finally met up again, I confronted him about what I saw. I didn't accuse him directly, but I asked more questions. He smiled, patted my knee, and said I was overthinking everything. He told me he was helping a friend move some merchandise. That was his word, merchandise. He laughed it off like it was nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. My gut told me to walk away right then, but I didn't. I kept telling myself that I didn't have proof, that maybe I was just being paranoid. Then came the night I'll never forget. I was home studying when Amber texted me, "Turn on the news." There it was, Jerome's face, clear as day, on the screen. Local authorities had issued a warrant for his arrest. Drug trafficking, possession with intent, distribution, the whole list. Apparently he'd been under investigation for months. The police had raided one of his properties and found everything: cash, weapons, packages of drugs, the works. I sat there, frozen, reading every article I could find. Everything clicked. The cash, the secretive phone calls, the sketchy meetings. I wasn't dating some successful real estate investor. I was dating a drug dealer who was now on the run. Jerome never contacted me again after that night. No texts, no calls. It was like he vanished. Part of me was terrified that he might show up at my door, but he never did. Weeks went by, then months. The police never reached out to me either, though I kept expecting them to. Sometimes I still wonder where he went, if he got caught, or if he slipped away somewhere far. It's weird thinking about how close I was to being dragged into something. I had no idea about one more wrong move, and I could have ended up involved in his mess without even realizing it. You always hear stories about people dating the wrong person, but you never expect it to happen to you. Jerome wasn't just some guy with issues. He was living a whole different life, and I was blind to it the entire time. When I first met Kelly, it honestly felt like I had finally hit the jackpot. She was one of those girls that made you wonder how you even got her to say yes in the first place. She was really pretty, always dressed like she stepped out of some magazine, and had this sweet voice that made everything she said sound softer. We met through a mutual friend at this house party. Nothing crazy, just a bunch of people drinking cheap beer and playing dumb party games. But when we got talking, it felt like the whole room kind of faded out. We hit it off fast. She laughed at my dumb jokes, kept brushing her hair behind her ear while she talked, and even texted me later that night saying how much fun she had. For the first few weeks, everything was perfect. We went out on dates, stayed up late texting, and spent weekends binge-watching shows on her couch. She was super affectionate too, always wanting to cuddle, always holding my hand in public like she wanted the world to know we were together. I was kind of in that early stage where you ignore every little thing because you're just happy someone like her is into you. But eventually, the little things started popping up. Weird little habits, like how she always had to double-check every door was locked at least 3 times before bed, or how she would bring her own sheets whenever she stayed over at my place. I thought maybe she was just extra careful or particular about stuff. No big deal then. It started happening the first time. It was weird, but I figured accidents happen. We were sleeping at my place, and in the middle of the night I woke up because something didn't feel right. There was this awful smell, and when I turned on the light, there it was. She had soiled herself in her sleep. I was in shock for a second, not even sure how to react. But she woke up panicking, apologizing like crazy, almost crying. She said she had some kind of stomach bug, and was too embarrassed to tell me earlier. Of course I tried to be understanding. I mean, what was I supposed to do? yell at her. It was gross. Yeah, but I didn't want to make her feel worse. We cleaned everything up together, changed the sheets, showered, and I told her not to worry about it. But then it happened again, and again. At first it was like once every couple of weeks. Always at night, always while she was asleep. She'd wake up acting super embarrassed every time, apologizing like she was mortified. She started bringing adult diapers in her bag, saying she was trying to avoid any more accidents, but somehow it kept happening anyway. And every time I'd help her clean it up because I didn't want her to feel alone or ashamed. But after a while, it started happening way too often, almost every few nights. And the weirdest part, she never once went to see a doctor about it. Every time I brought it up, she'd make some excuse, said she was too scared, or that it was probably nothing and would go away soon. I even offered to go with her, but she always shut it down. It was starting to wear me down. I mean, how many times can you strip your bed at 3 in the morning and scrub your mattress while pretending it's not a huge problem? I kept telling myself I was being supportive, that relationships are about helping each other through stuff. But honestly, it was getting disgusting. The smell would stick around for days, no matter how much I cleaned. I even started sleeping lighter, waking up every hour to check if it was happening again. Then came the night that broke me. We were at her place this time. I was already half expecting it, but I couldn't sleep. I laid there wide awake, and sometime around 2 in the morning, I felt her shift next to me. Then I heard it. Not even the smell yet, just the sound, and I froze. I didn't even turn on the light right away. I just sat there for a second, completely done. When I finally got up and flipped the light on, it was the same scene again. The sheets ruined, the mattress stained, and Kelly sitting up acting like she was devastated. Except this time, something felt off. She didn't look as panicked. She kept looking at me like she was waiting for me to say something, and I couldn't take it anymore. I told her straight up that we couldn't keep doing this, that something was seriously wrong, and if she wasn't going to get help, I couldn't stay in this relationship. She didn't cry this time. She just sat there, kind of quiet, staring at me. That was the last time I saw her. A few weeks later, I ran into her cousin at a coffee shop. We weren't close, but we recognized each other. We started talking, and out of nowhere, she brings it up. She said she was sorry about what happened, and then she told me something that made my stomach drop. Kelly had been doing it on purpose, not because she enjoyed it or anything, but because she wanted to see how much I cared. Like, she wanted to test how far I would go to help her, how many times I'd clean up after her and still stay. Her cousin said Kelly had some kind of twisted idea about love, like the more I stuck around through something horrible, the more it meant I was serious about her. Apparently she had done something similar with her last boyfriend too. I just sat there staring at my coffee, completely stunned. Everything made sense now. Why she never saw a doctor. Why she never really looked that embarrassed after a while. Why it kept happening more and more often. She had been pushing me to my limit just to see if I'd break. And I did. I don't know where she is now. I don't care. All I know is, I've never felt so mentally drained from a relationship in my entire life. And every time I think about her, I can still smell those nights. It's like it sticks with me, like it burned into my brain. If you would have told me 3 months ago that my whole friend group would completely fall apart because of some guy, I probably would have laughed it off. Like, yeah, right, my friends and I were tight. We had been through everything together. Breakups, school drama, stupid fights that lasted a week and then blew over, all of it. We weren't the type to let a guy mess with us. But then Stanley showed up. And honestly, I had no clue what was coming. I met Stanley at this little bookstore downtown. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My class got canceled and I decided to kill some time before heading home. He struck up a conversation while I was standing by the coffee table books, and it just kind of clicked from there. He was funny, really easy to talk to, and had this laid-back confidence that wasn't too much. He seemed older, not in a creepy way, but like someone who had his life together. He even offered to buy me coffee, and we ended up sitting there for almost 2 hours, just talking about random stuff. By the time I left, I was already smiling at my phone, waiting for his text. And he did text, right away, saying how much he enjoyed talking. That's how it started. The first couple weeks were great. He always planned little dates, picked cool spots I never would have thought of, and made me feel like I was the only person he was thinking about. He was sweet, thoughtful, remembered tiny details I had told him. He said the right things at the right time and always knew how to keep a conversation going. It felt easy with him, like I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. I didn't introduce him to my friends right away. I usually wait a while before mixing my dating life with my friend group, just to be safe. But slowly, something weird started happening. My friends already seemed to know who Stanley was, even though I hadn't told them anything yet. The first time I noticed it was when my friend Chloe mentioned his name while we were grabbing lunch. She said it so casually, like it was no big deal. I kind of laughed and asked how she knew him. She just said she'd seen him around before and changed the subject. I didn't think much of it at the time, but then it kept happening. My other friend Marissa brought him up too, saying she had run into him at the coffee shop she works at. Then my roommate Alyssa said she matched with him on some dating app months ago, but never actually met up. At first, I figured it was just coincidence. Maybe he just got around a lot, or maybe it's a small town thing where everyone kind of knows everyone. Still, it started eating at me. Every time I mentioned his name, someone had some kind of random connection to him. It was like he had already been circling around my life before I even met him. What started out feeling like coincidence started feeling off. I finally decided to ask him about it one night. He brushed it off and said it was just small town stuff, that he talked to a lot of people but none of it meant anything. He made it sound harmless, and for a while, I believed him. I didn't want to come off as jealous or paranoid. He always reassured me that he was only focused on me now, and I wanted to believe that. But things kept stacking up. My friend group started acting weird around me. Group chats that used to be busy got quiet when I was in them. People started canceling plans last minute. I caught a few of them whispering when I walked in the room. The energy was different, like they were hiding something but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Then everything came crashing down one night at this house party. I wasn't even planning to go, but Chloe talked me into it. I showed up a little late and walked into the living room where Stanley was already there. But he wasn't alone. He was standing way too close to Marissa, whispering something in her ear. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, like she didn't know whether to smile or apologize or run. Stanley acted like nothing was wrong, gave me a hug like everything was normal. That was when it all finally clicked in my head. He wasn't just talking to me. He had been talking to my friends too, multiple of them, at the same time, while I was dating him. And from the looks on their faces, I could tell they all knew. Some of them probably had no clue he was involved with all of us at once. And some probably found out too late but didn't want to be the one to tell me. Later that night, the truth started spilling out. Marissa admitted she had been seeing him a couple weeks before I met him, but thought it fizzled out. Chloe said he was still texting her and had asked her out even while he was with me. Alyssa found out he was still messaging girls on the app the whole time. He had basically been running through my entire friend group, like some kind of sick game, playing us against each other, without any of us realizing how deep it went. What messed me up the most was how casual he was about it. Like none of it was a big deal. Like we were the ones being dramatic for reacting to it. He tried to spin it like he hadn't made any promises, that we were all free to date whoever we wanted. But he had been lying to all of us the whole time, making each girl feel like she was special while lining up the next one right behind her. After that, everything fell apart fast. My friend group split in half. Some girls were mad at each other for not saying anything sooner. Some didn't want to be around anyone who reminded them of it. Group chats died, people stopped hanging out, and it never really went back to normal. After that, Stanley disappeared pretty quick after everything blew up. Deleted his social media, stopped showing up at the usual places, probably moved on to the next circle of girls somewhere else. To this day, I still don't fully understand what his end game was. Was he just bored? Did he get some thrill out of seeing how far he could push it? I'll never really know. All I know is that one guy managed to completely wreck years of friendship in just a few weeks, and somehow walked away like nothing happened. When I first met Lahi, she was like one of those people you meet once and feel like you've known forever. I don't even mean that in a cheesy way. It was weird how easy everything was with her from the start. We met at this random weekend flea market my buddy dragged me to. She was selling handmade candles at a tiny booth, talking to people like she owned the whole place. She had this wild curly hair, bright smile, and a voice that just kinda pulled you in. Before I even bought a candle, we were talking. She told me she was building her own little business empire. She called herself an entrepreneur, said she was into multiple things right now. I was impressed. I mean, how many people my age were really out there grinding like that? Most of my friends could barely get out of bed for work. After that first conversation, we started texting nonstop. It was the kind of texting where you stay up way too late and wake up exhausted but happy. We'd meet for coffee, hang out at the park, go on these long drives just to talk. She had ideas about everything. Every conversation made her seem so driven and ambitious. She told me she was saving up for bigger things, something about wanting full control over her life and not having to answer to a boss. I respected that a lot. She never really went into detail about her income though. I'd ask sometimes, more out of curiosity than anything, but she'd always kinda dodge it. She'd say stuff like she was involved in some personal ventures and creative hustles that kept her afloat. Part of me figured she was selling stuff online or maybe doing influencer stuff. It was 2025. People made money in a million ways that didn't make sense to anyone else. After about a month, I was fully into her, like bring her home to meet my family level into her, which was kind of a big deal for me since my family doesn't exactly hold back when it comes to new people. My mom's the nicest person alive but reads people like a hawk. My dad just sits back and watches, but you can always tell when he's silently judging. And then there's my sister, who's basically a walking lie detector. I figured bringing Lahi to our family dinner would be the big next step. She seemed excited when I invited her, kept asking about my parents and what kind of food my mom makes. She even offered to bring dessert. Everything felt right leading up to it. The night started off fine. She showed up looking amazing, brought some fancy cupcakes from a bakery, complimented my mom's cooking, laughed at my dad's corny jokes. Honestly, I thought she was killing it. Even my sister, who usually gave my past girlfriends a hard time, was warming up to her. Then it happened. My mom, in her usual sweet but nosy way, asked Lahi about her work. She said she heard I mentioned how entrepreneurial she was, and wanted to know more about her business. I remember Lahi smiling, leaning forward a little, and saying she was actually really proud of what she was doing. Her exact words were burned into my brain forever. She said she was an exotic dancer, just like that, in the middle of the dinner table. No hesitation, no warning. She said it like she was telling people she worked at a bank. And the worst part? She was smiling, proud of it. For a solid 5 seconds, nobody said anything. Forks halfway to mouths. My dad blinked like he misheard her. My sister almost choked on her water. My mom's face kind of froze in this polite smile she gives when she's trying not to lose it. Lahi kept talking like she really leaned into it. She said she worked at one of the top clubs in the city, made great money, and loved the freedom of it. She said she got to choose her schedule, never had to deal with annoying coworkers, and was able to stack serious cash while most people her age were drowning in student loans. I sat there like my soul left my body. It wasn't even just the fact that she was a stripper. It was that I had no clue. I'd been dating her for weeks, introducing her to my friends, texting her for hours every night, planning future trips, all while she was hiding something that big. And she didn't even seem sorry about keeping it secret. She acted like it was totally normal that she waited until the first dinner with my entire family to drop this bomb. My mom finally tried to recover, asking her how long she'd been doing it. Lahi answered like she was on a job interview, explaining how she started when she was short on rent, realized she was good at it, and just kept going. She said she had regulars who treated her well and even mentioned how she was considering opening her own club someday, like she was pitching a business plan to my parents. My sister shot me this look like, dude, what the hell? I had no answer. I just kept nodding like an idiot, praying for the night to end. When dinner finally wrapped up, my parents were polite enough not to bring it up again, but I could feel it. The whole ride home was dead silent. Lottie, on the other hand, acted like everything went great. She said she thought my family was super nice, and that she was glad to finally be open about everything. I broke up with her 2 days later, not because of her job exactly, but because of how she handled the whole thing. If she had told me earlier, been honest from the start, maybe I could have dealt with it. But hiding it and then dropping it like a bomb in front of my family, it made me question everything. What else was she hiding? What else was she waiting to proudly announce at the worst possible moment? She didn't even seem that surprised when I ended it. Almost like she expected me to. Like she'd done this before sometimes. I still wonder if that whole relationship was just some weird game to her. Like she liked testing people, seeing how far she could go before they snapped. All I know is I still can't walk past a candle stand at a market without hearing her voice in my head. When I first started dating Ashton, I actually thought I got lucky for once. For real, he was nothing like the guys I used to go for. He was chill, smart, super attentive, and didn't pull any of that weird mind game stuff. We met at this little coffee shop near campus. I was waiting for my order, scrolling through my phone, and he just walked up and started talking like we'd known each other forever. It wasn't forced or awkward. We started hanging out more after that. Long walks, late night drives, movies at his place, little lunch dates after my classes. It was easy, and I needed easy. My last relationship was a mess, so meeting someone who actually listened and seemed genuinely interested in me felt like a huge relief. One thing about me, I have this scar on my face. It starts near my eyebrow and curves slightly down toward my cheek. I got it when I was a kid, after this stupid fall off my bike. I don't usually bring it up unless someone asks. Over the years, I've gotten used to it. People stare sometimes, but whatever. It's part of me now. Ashton never seemed bothered by it. Not once did he make me feel self-conscious. That was one of the reasons I liked him so much. I figured if it didn't bother him, it didn't have to bother me either. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone saw me, not the scar. A couple months into dating, Ashton invited me to his family's house for dinner. Big deal, right? Meeting the family is always one of those relationship milestones that either goes great or completely blows up. I was nervous, but he kept telling me not to worry. He said they were nice people, super welcoming, and that they'd love me. The night came, and I tried to keep it together. Picked out a nice dress, did my hair, even spent way too long fixing my makeup to make sure everything looked smooth. When Ashton picked me up, he told me I looked amazing. That helped a bit. We pulled up to this big house in the suburbs, the kind with the perfect lawn and string lights hanging from the porch. His parents and siblings were already outside when we arrived, waiting like they had been tracking our arrival. They all smiled, big warm greetings, and I thought maybe this wouldn't be so bad at first. Everything was okay. His mom hugged me, his dad shook my hand, his younger sister complimented my dress. We sat down for dinner, and his mom brought out this huge spread of food. Everyone was talking and laughing, and I tried to relax. But then came the comments. It started small. His aunt, who had stopped by for dinner, squinted at my face like she was studying it. She asked how I got the scar, but not in a kind, curious way. More like she was pointing out something ugly in front of everyone. I smiled politely and gave her the usual story about falling off my bike. Tried to brush it off like I always do. Then, his grandmother chimed in, saying how brave I was for still wearing dresses and makeup, even with a scar like that. Like I was some kind of charity case who shouldn't even try to look nice. The table got quiet for a second, but Ashton didn't say a word. He just kept eating like nothing happened. The comments kept rolling in, one after another. His cousin whispered to another family member, loud enough that I heard, about how noticeable the scar was under the lights. His mom asked if I had ever considered getting it fixed because, according to her, modern medicine could do wonders. His sister asked if people ever stared at me in public, and said she didn't think she could handle that kind of attention herself. Every single one of them took their turn, like they were passing around some invisible mic to get their little digs in. I kept glancing at Ashton, waiting for him to say something. Anything. Defend me. Step in. Change the subject. But he didn't. He just sat there, smiling awkwardly, acting like he didn't even hear them. Like he wasn't fully aware of how brutal his family was being. I started feeling hot. My stomach was tight. My hands were shaking under the table. I kept trying to tell myself not to lose it. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you upset. Just get through the dinner, then talk to Ashton about it later. But then his dad made the final comment that broke me. He said it was admirable. That Ashton was dating someone in spite of her appearance. Like I was some project Ashton was working on, not a real person. I saw Ashton glance up for a second, like maybe that one finally got his attention. But all he did was give this nervous little half laugh and sip his drink. That was it. I pushed my chair back and stood up. No dramatic scene, no screaming or crying. Just done. I mumbled something about not feeling well and walked straight out the front door. Ashton followed me outside, asking if I was okay. Like he hadn't just let his entire family verbally dissect me for the last hour. I didn't even look at him. I just kept walking to the car, got in, and left him standing there. We broke up. The next day, I didn't want to hear any explanations or apologies. If he couldn't stand up for me in front of his family, he never really respected me to begin with. That dinner showed me exactly who he was, and who his family was. Since then, I've avoided even driving near that part of town. Every time I think about that night, I feel sick. Not because of the scar they didn't break me like they thought. They did, but because I let myself believe someone like Ashton actually cared. I met Bianca at this art show downtown, and right away there was something wild about her. Not wild like crazy, but unpredictable, the kind of person you don't quite know whether to be drawn to or to run away from. She had this energy that pulled people in. Her laugh was loud and a little rough around the edges, and she dressed like she didn't care what anyone thought. Honestly, that's what got me interested first. I'm not a flashy guy, but I do have a decent wardrobe with some pretty expensive pieces. I'd saved up for designer jackets, limited sneakers, nice shirts, things I wouldn't just let anyone touch. Bianca didn't seem to care about any of that at first. She was the opposite, rocking thrift store jeans and paint-splattered t-shirts like she was about to go paint a mural or something. I liked that about her. It felt real. No filters. No pretending, no trying to impress anyone. We started hanging out more and more. At first, she was like this breath of fresh air, compared to all the people I'd dated before who cared way too much about appearances or money. Bianca was just herself. And I thought maybe that meant she wouldn't care about my expensive stuff either. I was wrong. The first time I noticed something was off was when I saw her wearing one of my leather jackets. Not just trying it on for a few minutes, but actually wearing it out like she borrowed it for a couple of hours. It was the jacket I'd been eyeing for months before finally buying it. When I asked about it, she just shrugged and said it was comfortable. That would have been fine if it ended there, but it didn't. It started happening more often. She'd grab my limited edition sneakers, the ones I kept safe in the closet because I didn't want them to get beat up. Then, one day, she wore one of my nicer shirts to go fix her bike or do something messy like that. At first I laughed off, thinking she just liked my style. But deep down I was a little annoyed. One afternoon was the worst. She showed up wearing one of my silk shirts, the one I'd saved for special occasions. But instead of looking sharp, the shirt was covered in grass stains and dirt because she'd been trimming plants in her backyard. I couldn't believe it. That shirt meant something to me, and here she was, using it like it was just an old rag. I told her I didn't want her using my clothes like that, especially not for gardening or anything dirty. She looked at me like I was crazy, like I was the one who didn't get it. She said something about clothes being made to be worn and used, not locked away in some closet collecting dust. I tried to explain that some things are expensive for a reason and need to be treated carefully, but she just didn't see it my way. Then the clothes started coming back, torn, stained, or worse. One pair of jeans had a huge rip in the knee that wasn't there before. I was pissed but tried to stay calm and talk to her about it. I didn't want to make a big deal, but it was my stuff, and she was wrecking it. It felt like my things were under attack. I kept thinking, why would someone I cared about treat my stuff like trash? The more I tried to bring it up, the more she brushed me off or acted like I was being too sensitive. I didn't want to control Hai, just wanted to protect what I'd worked for. Then, things got worse. I started noticing scratches on my car. At first I thought maybe someone dinged it in the parking lot, but the marks kept appearing in new places. One day, I caught her near the car, fiddling with the windows. I asked what she was doing and she didn't say a word. The next morning, my driver's side window was completely smashed. Glass was everywhere. That's when it hit me. It wasn't random vandalism. It was her. She was mad because I told her to stop ruining my stuff. I felt like everything I owned was being attacked by the person I trusted most. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize or try to make things right. Instead, she flipped it around, saying I was obsessed with things that I cared more about stuff than her. She said, if I wanted a girlfriend, I should accept her for who she was, and stop trying to control every little thing she did. But it wasn't about control. I wasn't asking her to change her personality or her style. I just didn't want my belongings trashed. Things I saved up for, things that had meaning to me. I worked hard to get those things, and she was wrecking them like they meant nothing. I started locking my closet, hiding my jackets and sneakers. I stopped letting her into my apartment when I wasn't home. But the tension just grew. It felt like living with a ticking time bomb. I was always worried about what she'd break next. Then one night, I came home late after work and froze. My car was a total mess. Windows smashed on every side, paint scratched deep with keys, tires slashed. I just stood there, stunned, trying to wrap my head around it. I couldn't stay with someone who did that. I ended things the next day. Looking back, I realized I was blinded by how cool and wild she seemed at first. I thought her carefree attitude was refreshing, but it was just a mask. Underneath was someone who didn't respect me or what was mine. Someone who used her energy not to build a relationship but to tear me down. I never expected a relationship to turn into a nightmare, where my belongings became targets and my trust was shattered. Bianca wasn't just careless, she was destructive, and she didn't care who she hurt along the way. Even now, months later, I still get uneasy whenever I see something scratched or stained. It's like a reminder of what I lost, and who I thought she was versus who she really was. I thought I was dating someone wild in a good way. Turns out, I was dating a hurricane. He admitted something that chilled me to the bone. Back in his early 20s, he used to date married women. That alone was unsettling. But what he said next was even more disturbing. He told me he thought it was amazing because all those women would complain endlessly about their husbands' little things they hated, what made them feel neglected, what drove them crazy. Vlad said he took mental notes of everything they said and then used that information to become the perfect man. For the next girl he dated at first, I didn't know how to react. On the surface, it sounded almost clever, like he was just saying he learned from other people's mistakes. But the way he said it was different. There was no shame, no guilt. It was like he was proud of it. Proud that he had been spying on women's lives and then using their secrets against their own partners. It felt manipulative, like he was playing a game instead of forming real connections. That's when a cold knot formed in my stomach. I realized Vlad wasn't really about connection or love. He was treating relationships like a science project, gathering data and using it to manipulate and control. I started to see how dangerous he really was. At first, it felt flattering how well he listened. He remembered everything I said, the things I liked, the things that bothered me. He seemed to anticipate what I wanted, and honestly, it was nice to feel understood after past relationships where I felt invisible. But over time it turned creepy. It was like I wasn't a person to him anymore, but a checklist he had to master. I remember one time I casually mentioned how my last boyfriend never brought me flowers, and the very next day, Vlad showed up with a bouquet. It seemed sweet, but Then I realized he was just ticking off items from some other girl's complaints. It wasn't about me or what I truly wanted. It was about being flawless on paper. The spontaneity was fake, rehearsed. The more I thought about it, the more I saw how he carefully crafted his persona. He told me how he'd break down the things women hated about their husbands, and then pretend to be exactly the opposite. It wasn't about love or even liking the person he was with. It was about winning a twisted game, like he was a player in some tournament where the prize was control, power over the women he dated. I started noticing little things that didn't add up. Vlad would ask these odd questions about my friends and past relationships, always trying to find weaknesses or secrets he could use. Once, I caught him making notes in a little notebook he always carried around. When I asked, he said it was just work stuff, but I never believed him. It was like he was cataloging every detail about me, waiting for the right moment to use it. His behavior became more controlling, he'd get jealous over the smallest things, a text from an old friend, a joke I made with a guy at a party. He acted like it was because he cared, but really, it felt like he was trying to trap me. He didn't want me to have a life outside what he could control. Every time I pushed back, he'd say he was learning and changing. But the truth was, he just wanted more power over me. One night, after a few drinks, Vlad got even more honest. He told me that some of the women he dated didn't even realize they were being used until much later. That made my stomach drop. I didn't want to be one of those stories, the girl who woke up one day and realized she'd been manipulated for months or years, trapped in a relationship where love was just a mask. I tried to distance myself, making excuses to not hang out as much. Vlad noticed immediately and got pushy. He said he wanted to fix things and promised he was changing, but I didn't want to be part of his twisted plan. I could see through the facade now. The last straw came when I found out he'd been talking to one of my close friends behind my back. She told me Vlad had used the same routine on her, listening carefully, taking notes, then acting like the perfect boyfriend. It wasn't love or connection. It was a formula he copied again and again. The idea that he was doing this to multiple people at once hit me like a punch to the gut. I finally ended things. I blocked him on every platform and told a few close people what had been going on. It wasn't easy. Vlad had this way of making you feel special even while he was using you, making you doubt yourself and question if you were the problem. But deep down, I knew I had to get away. Looking back, I realized Vlad was never really the perfect man. He was a predator disguised as the ideal boyfriend. His whole thing was about control, about collecting secrets and weaknesses to make himself unbeatable. It wasn't about love or respect. It was a game, and I was just another player he'd move on from once he'd learned enough. Even now, months later, I still feel the weight of what happened. I question how I missed the signs, how I let myself be manipulated so thoroughly. But I'm trying to move forward, to rebuild my trust in myself and in others. The experience taught me a hard lesson. Sometimes the people who seem perfect are the ones you have to watch out for the most. You don't expect someone who seems perfect to have any dark corners. When I first met Mindy, it was like she was made for me, smart, funny, and the kind of girl who laughed at my dumb jokes like they were gold. Everything about her felt too good to be true, but I ignored the usual red flags because, honestly, I wanted this to work. What I didn't get was how someone so perfect could be hiding so much. At first, it was little things. Every time I asked to meet her friends, she'd change the subject or say it wasn't the right time yet. Meeting her family, forget it. She made excuses like they were private people, or that she was still sorting things out with them. I figured maybe her past was complicated, or her life was messy in a way that made her protective. I was patient. I told myself to chill and let things happen naturally. But the more I pushed, the more distant she got. When she wasn't dodging questions outright, she'd get this weird nervous smile, like I was missing something big. It was like there was a wall between us that I couldn't break through. I chalked it up to anxiety or trust issues. Maybe she'd been hurt before. I kept thinking, everyone deserves a chance. She was always careful with her phone. I never saw her take it out to text or call when we were together, and if it buzzed, she'd quickly lock the screen or hide it away. At first, I thought it was just her wanting privacy, but later, that habit felt more like a secret to protect. One night, after a few drinks, a friend of mine mentioned hearing something odd about Mindy's last relationship. I didn't want to believe it at first, but curiosity got the better of me. I started digging quietly, scrolling through forums, local news archives, even social media accounts that might be linked to her. What I found hit me like a punch to the gut. Her ex disappeared. Not like we broke up and lost touch, disappeared, but completely vanished without a trace. There were old news stories, missing person reports, and vague police bulletins that mentioned a guy matching the description of her ex. The thing was, no one seemed to know what happened to him. No body, no witnesses, just a sudden stop in communication. The articles were full of questions with no answers, people hoping for closure that never came. The weirdest part, no one talked about it openly, like it was some secret everyone tiptoed around. I confronted Mindy, or tried to, anyway. I asked her about her past and the guy she used to date. She got cold, distant. The same nervous smile turned into something icy. She deflected every question and acted like I was crazy for even asking. That's when I started noticing the little things I missed before: how she'd check over her shoulder when we were out, how she kept her phone locked tight, and how she'd get defensive if I tried to bring up her past. She once told me, "Some stories are better left untold." At the time, I thought it was just a vague way of saying she didn't want to talk about old relationships. Now I realize it was a warning I didn't listen to. The scarier part was when people in the neighborhood started giving me weird looks. Someone even warned me to be careful, said they knew about Mindy's ex and how things ended badly, but no one would say more. It was like everyone was in on a secret they wouldn't share. At times, I felt like I was being watched or followed, though I never caught anyone outright. The more I learned, the more I felt trapped. Mindy was like a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit, and the picture it made was unsettling. The perfect girl wasn't perfect at all. She was hiding something dangerous, something I wasn't supposed to see. One night after a fight, Mindy stormed out, leaving her journal open on her bed. Curiosity and fear pushed me to glance inside. The pages were filled with strange entries about keeping the past buried and making sure nothing comes back to light. She wrote about the ex, but only in cryptic ways, words heavy with fear, frustration, and something darker underneath it all. There were mentions of threats, people watching, and promises to never let the past ruin the present. It sounded like she was protecting herself from something or someone. My heart pounded as I read, realizing I had stumbled onto something I wasn't meant to see. I closed the journal quickly, my hands shaking. After that, things changed between us. I tried to pull away, but Mindy wouldn't let me. She got clingy, like she needed me close to keep the past quiet. It was suffocating, and I felt more alone than ever. Every moment around her was heavy with unspoken secrets, like walking on thin ice that could crack any second. I remember one night when she grabbed my hand and whispered, "If anyone ever asks, just say you don't know me." The words froze me. What kind of life was she living? Why did she think that was necessary? I started feeling paranoid, like I was in a thriller movie. Every noise outside, every knock on the door made me jump. I wondered if Mindy's past was catching up with her, or if the danger was right here with me. In the end, I walked away before I got too deep into whatever it was she was hiding. I couldn't be part of a life full of secrets and fear. The whole thing stuck with me though. You meet someone, you think they're perfect, but some things are better left unknown. Sometimes the biggest smiles hide the darkest shadows, and with Mindy, those shadows were impossible to ignore. Even now, I catch myself wondering what really happened to her ex, and whether she's still running from something or someone. The mystery haunts me, a reminder that not everything is as it seems, no matter how perfect it looks on the surface. You ever get that creeping feeling someone's always watching you? Like not just the usual glance from strangers, but someone who knows where you'll be before you even decide to go there. That's how it started with Donnie, this guy I met online. At first, everything was cool. We clicked fast, funny, smart, seemed like a good dude. But then things got weird, real fast. Like he started showing up everywhere. Not in a cute coincidence way, but in a way that made me want to lock all my doors and never leave the house. We hadn't even exchanged addresses. I barely knew where he lived, and he definitely didn't know much about my daily routines. But there he was at my gym, the coffee shop I hit every morning, even the little bookstore where I'd spend hours on weekends. No way was it random. I thought maybe it was just a phase, like he was really into me and just happened to be at the same places, but it didn't stop. It only got worse. The first time I noticed him was at the gym. I was doing my usual circuit. When I caught him out of the corner of my eye, he was standing near the dumbbells, acting like he belonged there. I froze, trying to decide if I was imagining things. Then he smiled and gave me this weird little nod, like he was saying, "I'm here." I felt a pit in my stomach, like something was off. I didn't say anything, but I stopped going at the same times. The next day, there he was again, like clockwork. I tried to bring it up casually, hoping maybe he'd admit it was just coincidence. But he brushed it off. That was the thing, he never explained, never apologized, just acted like it was no big deal. Like me freaking out was the weird part. Then came the coffee shop. I met a friend there one Saturday morning, and guess who was sitting at the table right behind us? Donnie, pretending to read a book, but clearly paying attention. It felt invasive, like he was stalking me, but I wanted proof before jumping to conclusions. Work was next. I work in this small office downtown, pretty low-key. One afternoon, I went to grab lunch, and there he was, standing near the entrance like he had a reason to be there. It freaked me out so bad I almost ran out. No way he could have just popped in. He didn't even work in the building. Started paying attention to my phone too, noticing little things that didn't add up. My social media, suddenly all my posts were getting viewed within minutes of me posting, no matter the time. Stories I put up vanished quickly, and I'd find weird comments or likes from accounts that felt too familiar, but were anonymous. I tried changing my privacy settings, but it didn't stop. One night, I got bold and looked through the apps on my phone. That's when I found it's some kind of location tracker hidden in the background, sending my real-time whereabouts to an app I didn't recognize. I deleted it, but it kept coming back. It was like Donnie had found a way to hack into my phone, or had installed something without me knowing. The thought that someone could secretly follow me, watch my every move through my own phone, made my skin crawl. I started feeling paranoid every time I picked up my phone, wondering if he was looking through it at that very moment. I even started keeping my phone in another room at night because I didn't want to be tracked while I slept. I confronted Donnie with what I found, but he just smiled like he was proud. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said he just wanted to be close, to know I was safe. But it wasn't about safety, it was about control. I felt trapped. I stopped going out, changed. My routines, even moved my gym times and routes. Still, I caught glimpses of him. He was always there around the corner, in the parking lot, sometimes just watching from a distance. It felt like no matter what I did, I couldn't shake him. Like I was trapped in my own life. The isolation started to hit hard. I stopped seeing friends as often because I was scared he'd show up anywhere. I stopped posting on social media altogether. Even my apartment felt unsafe. I checked locks obsessively and started buying motion sensor lights for outside. Every unexpected noise set my heart racing. The last straw was when I found a small package on my doorstep one evening after work. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, no return address. Inside was a scrapbook filled with photos of me from places he'd followed me to at the gym, walking to work, even snapshots taken from my apartment window. No note, just those creepy pictures staring back at me. I sat on the floor, heart pounding, unable to move. The photos weren't blurry or accidental. They were clear, up close, taken at moments when I was completely unaware. It was like a physical record of my being watched, documented. I felt violated in a way I never thought possible. That was when I finally cut him off. I blocked him everywhere, changed my phone number, and told a few close friends what was going on. I reported him to the police, but without concrete proof beyond the photos and creepy behavior. There wasn't much they could do. It felt like the law wasn't built for this kind of obsession. Looking back, I realize how easily someone can go from seeming perfect to completely terrifying. Donnie wasn't just into me, he was obsessed, and he used every trick to keep tabs on me without me noticing. It's wild how someone can slip past your defenses and turn your whole life upside down without you even realizing it until it's too late now. Every time I see someone watching a little too closely, I remember Donnie and the way he made normal places feel like traps. I still catch myself looking over my shoulder or double-checking locks. The feeling of safety that once came naturally is something I'm still trying to get back. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever fully shake that feeling, that sense that someone, somewhere, is always watching. And I hope I never meet anyone like Donnie again. You think you know what's normal in dating, until someone comes along and flips the script so fast it messes with your head. That's exactly what happened when I started seeing Lizzie. At first, she seemed cool, funny, easy to talk to, the kind of person who could make a dull Thursday night feel like something special. She had this energy that pulled you in, made you feel like maybe you'd found someone who just got you. But there was this weird urgency about her right from the start. Not in a cute, let's see each other more way, but in a pushy, kinda desperate vibe that made me blink twice. It didn't take long before she started dropping hints about moving in together, like she was already picking out furniture. In her head, talking about how we'd share everything and split bills. I wasn't even sure if I was ready to be that serious, but I figured maybe she was just ahead of herself. No big deal, right? I thought maybe she just wanted to feel close. But then she switched gears. Fast. Out of nowhere, Lizzie started asking for money. Not like, hey, can you cover coffee this week kind of thing, but big sums for some weird business opportunity she was involved with. She talked about this because she was passionate about how it was a guaranteed way to make some quick cash if I helped her out. At first I was skeptical but tried to keep an open mind because she sounded so convinced. That was mistake number one. I wasn't ready to throw money at something that felt shady, so I hesitated. Told her I needed to think it over, figure out my own finances. That's when everything changed. Suddenly, Lizzie was all cold. Her texts went from sweet to sharp in seconds. She started guilt-tripping me like I was some terrible person for not trusting her. Then it got worse. Threats started slipping in. She hinted that if I wasn't on board, then maybe I didn't care about her at all. Like she'd built this whole world where I was either with her, helping her succeed, or I was against her. It felt suffocating. When I tried to pull back or say no, she flipped completely, going from pleading to manipulative in a way that made me question everything. The craziest part was how fast she switched. One minute she'd be begging, the next, she'd be cold and distant, and then somehow she'd pull me back in by promising it was all about trust and loyalty. It was like walking a tightrope, trying not to upset her, but also not wanting to lose myself in the mess. We ended up arguing more and more, but every time I thought I was done, she'd show up with this side of vulnerability that made me pause. I wanted to believe she wasn't just using me, but the whole situation was messy and confusing. I started noticing little things like she avoided talking about her job, and anytime I asked about where the money was going, she'd get defensive or change the subject. One night, after one of those arguments, I found a message from some guy on her phone asking about the funds and when they'd arrive. That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't just some business or cause. Lizzie was running some kind of scam, using people like me to fund it. The money wasn't going to a charity or startup. It was just disappearing. I confronted her, but she denied everything and got angry, blaming me for not trusting her. That's when the threats turned serious. She started saying things that made me worried for my safety. Not just emotionally, but physically. It was like she had this dark side I never saw coming, ready to use intimidation when things didn't go her way. I pulled back completely after that, but the nightmare wasn't over. Lizzie didn't take rejection lightly. She'd call or text, nonstop, showing up outside my place, leaving notes on my car. I blocked her on everything, but she found ways to get through. It felt like I couldn't escape. Eventually I had to get the police involved. Even then she twisted the story, acting like she was the victim, trying to make me out as the bad guy. It was surreal, like I was living in a bad movie, where the person you thought you trusted is the one causing all the chaos. Looking back, The whole thing was like a trap. The push to move in, the rush for money, the manipulation and threats, it was all a way to trap me into something I never signed up for. I never thought dating could turn into this kind of horror story, but with Lizzie, it did. No happy ending here, just a lesson in how fast things can go from promising to terrifying. When someone's playing a different game from the start, it's crazy how easy it is to get caught up in someone's charm before the mask starts slipping. At first, Lizzie's urgency felt like passion. She seemed so committed to building something real, so eager to merge our lives. I wanted to believe in that, even if it felt a little fast. But that urgency wasn't about love, it was about control. She needed me in her grip financially and emotionally, and wasn't shy about pushing boundaries to get it. What really shook me was the speed of it all. One moment, we were laughing about dumb movies and sharing playlists, and the next, I was stuck in this whirlwind of demands and emotional manipulation. It was exhausting, and I felt like I was losing my grip on what was real. The money thing was the biggest red flag I ignored. When Lizzie first brought it up, she painted this picture of a cause worth investing in, a startup that would change lives, she said. She talked about the team she was working with and how I could be part of something bigger. But the vagueness bothered me. She dodged my questions about specifics, financials, and timeline. And when I hesitated, it wasn't just disappointment I got, it was anger. The guilt trips were constant. If you really cared about me, you'd help. I'm doing this for us. You don't believe in me. It wasn't just emotional pressure, it felt like a trap tightening. Every no I said was met with resistance until I felt I had no choice but to say yes, just to keep the peace. It was sickening, and when I finally saw that message from the other guy asking about the funds, my world cracked open. I realized I was just a source of money to Lizzie, not a partner. The realization was crushing. I confronted her, hoping for honesty or some kind of explanation, but instead, she flipped on me, playing the victim and accusing me of betrayal. The threats that followed weren't subtle. They were chilling. She hinted at exposing private things, said she'd make things difficult for me if I left. And worst of all, I started fearing for my safety. That wasn't the person I met. That wasn't the person who made me laugh in those early days. It was like I'd been living with a stranger wearing her face. After cutting ties, the harassment didn't stop. She was relentless: texts, calls, appearing in places she shouldn't be. I had to change routines, be cautious about what I shared with friends, and even install security cameras around my home. It felt like living under a shadow, constantly looking over my shoulder. The police involvement helped, but it wasn't a quick fix. Lizzie was crafty, twisting stories, making herself out to be the victim. It was exhausting and heartbreaking to have my experience minimized and questioned. But I learned to stand firm, gather evidence, and lean on the support network I rebuilt around me now. When I think back to those early days, I see the warning signs clearly: too much urgency, too many demands, vague stories, and the pressure to comply. It's a lesson that love shouldn't feel like a trap. It shouldn't make you question your own worth or safety. You know how people joke about dating horror stories and you think, nah, it's never really that bad? Well, let me tell you about Luke. When I first started seeing him, I thought he was just quirky, maybe a little intense, but mostly harmless. Then came dinner time. Every single night, without fail, Luke made me eat whatever he cooked, and, trust me, his cooking was something else. Not in a good way. It didn't take long for me to realize this wasn't just he likes to cook. It was more like he forced this weird ritual on me. Like every night I was stuck at his place, sitting across from a plate piled high with some unrecognizable mush or mystery stew. The first few times I smiled and tried to be polite, thinking maybe he just wasn't that good at cooking and it was his way of showing affection. But the more dinners I survived, the more I realized this was some kind of power move, or worse. Luke's cooking was straight up terrible. I mean, I'm talking burnt onions swimming in cold pasta sauce, mystery meat that looked like it had been marinating for a century, and salads drowned in dressing so thick it felt like eating glue. And the smell was like a mix of old socks and gym locker room. but he was so proud of it, like he was this culinary genius, and I was the lucky guest at his exclusive tasting menu. What made it worse was how he reacted. When I tried to push back or say I wasn't hungry, he didn't just ignore me or offer something else. Nope, he doubled down. He'd stare at me with this intense, almost scary focus, like daring me to refuse. Sometimes, he'd make these weird comments about how sharing a meal was about trust and commitment, like this was some twisted test of loyalty. If I didn't eat, it was like I was betraying him or breaking some invisible contract. Most nights, I'd force myself to choke down at least a bite or two, hoping it would make him back off. But it never did. One night, it got really bad. I was exhausted, drained from a long day, and the food was just unbearably sad plate of burnt rice and weird gravy that smelled like something rotten. I tried to tell him I wasn't feeling great and maybe we could order something instead. He didn't just say no. He got this cold look and said something that made my skin crawl, like I was disappointing him in some serious way. That night, I sat there, stomach twisting, trying to figure out how to get out of this without causing a meltdown. And the meltdown was exactly what I got when I finally told him I couldn't eat it anymore. Luke snapped in a way I never expected. The sweet, quirky guy was gone, replaced by this sharp, angry version who accused me of not caring about him, of disrespecting what he'd made. It was terrifying, like I'd stepped into a completely different world. After that, dinners weren't just bad, they were weapons. He'd cooked this terrible food knowing I hated it, watching me choke it down with a satisfied smirk. It was less about the food and more about control. I started dreading going to his place, but also felt trapped because every time I tried to leave early or say no, the mood flipped, and suddenly I was the bad guy. The weirdest part was how little he cared about the actual cooking. It was like, the food didn't matter, only the reaction. I wasn't allowed to skip meals, eat something else, or even complain. I felt like I was trapped in this endless loop of terrible dinners and emotional blackmail. Friends would ask how my dates were going, and I'd laugh it off, not wanting to explain that the worst part wasn't him being creepy or rude, but the fact that I was basically being forced to eat awful food every night. One weekend, I decided to spend a night at my own place to get some space. Luke didn't text much, but when he did, the messages were weird, like passive-aggressive reminders about loyalty and how much effort he put into the dinners. When I finally met up with him again, he cooked a meal that looked even worse than usual. I barely touched it, and that was the final straw. He lost it right there in his kitchen. I won't lie, it was scary. He yelled, stormed around, and accused me of throwing everything away. I just grabbed my stuff and left, feeling like I was escaping some weird kind of food prison. I never went back. Looking back, it sounds kind of ridiculous being trapped by bad cooking. But with Luke, it wasn't about the food at all. It was about control, about pushing boundaries until I felt like I had no say in what was happening. Every plate was a test, every bite a battle. I guess I learned the hard way that sometimes the worst kind of horror isn't monsters or ghosts, it's the small things that slowly take over your life, like terrible dinners you can't say no to. So yeah, that was Luke, the guy who made me eat his awful food every single night, like it was some twisted game I didn't sign up for. The worst part, it wasn't just about the food. It was about losing myself a little more with every meal. And that's a kind of horror that sticks with you way longer than any ghost story ever could. There's something weird about finally being invited inside the place of someone you're dating. You expect it to be casual, easy, a peek into their world, the kind of moment where things start to feel a little more real, a little less So when George asked me over, I was honestly excited. We'd been talking for a while, but he'd always been mysterious about where he lived. He'd dodge questions about roommates or family, or give vague answers that didn't really add up. I figured maybe he just valued his privacy, or wasn't ready to share that part of his life yet. But when he said, "Come over tonight," I thought, okay, this is a big step. Maybe I'm finally getting past all the casual text, flirting, and weirdly timed "what are you doing" messages. I didn't expect to step inside and immediately feel like I'd walked into a trap. The moment I crossed the threshold, Something hit me. This wasn't just new apartment awkwardness or the usual, he's a little messy vibe. No, it was something else entirely. The air was thick, almost suffocating, like the walls themselves were watching, waiting. I looked around and noticed a pair of eyes staring from the shadowed corner of the living room. Not George's eyes. Someone else's. A woman sat there, arms crossed, lips tight, eyes cold and calculating. She looked right through me, like I was a stranger invading sacred territory. I could practically feel her disapproval burn a hole in my chest. George acted like everything was normal, like it was no big deal, but the way he looked at her like he was tiptoeing around a landmine made me freeze. It was clear this wasn't just some roommate he forgot to mention. This was something else. Someone who held power in his place. Someone who controlled the vibe. Controlled George even. I tried to make conversation, trying to cut through the tension, but every time I glanced over, the woman's glare was sharp and unblinking. It wasn't just dislike, it was pure, possessive hatred. The tension was so thick it felt like I was suffocating. It was obvious she didn't want me there. George, meanwhile, was polite but stiff, trying to keep things calm but clearly uncomfortable. I didn't know if I should stay or run, but I was frozen, stuck in this weird showdown without knowing the rules. As the night dragged on, I started piecing things together. George was evasive when I asked about who she was. He made excuses, vague comments about, she's just a friend, but I wasn't buying it. The woman didn't seem like a friend. She watched every move I made, like a predator waiting for me to slip. Her eyes followed me when I went to the kitchen, sat down. Even when I tried to laugh at some of George's jokes, nothing escaped her. It was like she was silently warning me, you don't belong here. The worst part was how George never stood up for me, not once. Every time the woman's gaze cut into me, he'd look away or change the subject. It was like he was terrified of her, or maybe worse, he didn't want to upset her. I realized then that I was caught in some twisted power play, and I was the outsider getting crushed under the weight of someone else's control. Later, I overheard a quiet argument between George and the woman in the other room. Her voice was cold, demanding, and his was apologetic, clearly scared. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone was enough. This wasn't just a roommate situation, it was a toxic, controlling nightmare I'd walked right into. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. George was charming and funny, sure, but he was also trapped by this woman who lived in his space like a shadow, a constant judge and jailer. And worse, he let her have that power without even trying to protect me. It was like he'd given up, resigned himself to being under her thumb. I kept replaying the evening in my head, the cold stares, the silent tension, the way George seemed to shrink whenever the woman was around. It made me wonder how long he'd been living like that. Was this something new? Or had he been in this toxic situation for years, just waiting for someone to pull him out? And how did someone let that kind of control take over their life without fighting back? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that this was a dynamic I didn't want to be part of. I wasn't just a visitor in George's apartment. I was a pawn in a power game I hadn't signed up for. The air of hostility was suffocating, and I could feel myself shrinking under it. When I finally told George I needed space, that I couldn't deal with the tension or the silent wars happening around me, he didn't argue much. He just looked relieved, like maybe he was too tired to fight back anyway. I left his apartment feeling drained and weirdly small, like I'd been swallowed whole by a quiet storm. That whole night stayed with me. This place that was supposed to be a step forward in dating turned out to be this weird prison with eyes that never blinked and a presence that crushed everything good. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen the real George, one who was stuck, beaten down, and powerless in his own home. Sometimes I wonder if he'll ever break free. If he realizes how much control that woman has over him, or if he's too afraid or too worn down to fight back. It's heartbreaking to think about, knowing that someone who seemed so alive and full of jokes and charm was actually living like a prisoner. So yeah, being invited inside felt like crossing into a different dimension, one where the real power wasn't with my date, but with someone else who made sure I never forgot I was just a visitor in a place ruled by cold, unspoken rules. It's a strange, Unsettling feeling to realize the person you're dating is caught in someone else's grip. And even stranger to see them let it happen without resistance. There's this weird thing about meeting someone who seems cool, right? Like they're fun to talk to, you vibe well, and things just click. That's exactly how it started with Kate. We met through one of those dating apps. Nothing fancy, just casual swiping until something felt different. She was smart, funny, and seemed pretty down to earth. I thought maybe I finally hit the jackpot. But man, I had no idea how twisted this was about to get. At first, everything seemed normal. We chatted every day, met up a few times, and I honestly thought I was just lucky. She talked about her life, her job, some friends, but there was this odd detail. She never really let me meet anyone important to her or see much of her daily world. That was weird, sure, but I shrugged it off because sometimes people just like their privacy, right? Maybe she was just a little guarded. But then things started to get strange and, that's putting it lightly. One day, out of nowhere, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to look her up on some other apps. Just to see what else she was up to. Nothing major, just casual checking. That's when I found it. There wasn't just one Kate. There were like 5 or 6 different profiles scattered across various platforms, each with a different name, different pictures, even different stories. Some of them were obviously fake, different ages, jobs, even cities that didn't line up with what she'd told me. But what freaked me out was how many of these profiles seemed to connect to her somehow. Some had photos that looked like her, but clearly altered, like they'd been filtered or warped just enough to fool the eye. Others had short videos with her voice, but with different names tagged or different backstories in the captions. I started piecing it together, and it hit me. This wasn't just someone with a private life. Kate was living a bunch of lives online, juggling multiple fake identities across apps and websites. At first, I thought maybe she was doing it for fun, or maybe even some kind of work, like marketing or acting. But as I dug deeper, it didn't add up. None of the profiles linked to anything professional or harmless. They all seemed designed to meet people specifically, to pull in guys like me. The more I looked, the more it felt like a trap. Every time I tried to bring it up, or even hint that I knew something was off, Kate would get weirdly quiet or just disappear for a while. Then she'd pop back up acting like nothing was wrong, like she was the same girl I'd been talking to all along. It was this maddening loop of confusion, suspicion, and awkward silence. Eventually, I confronted her straight up. I told her I knew about the multiple accounts, the fake stories, all of it. She didn't deny it. Instead, she just vanished. No calls, no texts, no replies, like she'd evaporated into thin air. But that wasn't the end. Days later, I started getting messages from unknown numbers. At first, I ignored them, thinking it was spam or some prank. But then the texts got personal, creepily specific. It felt like someone was watching my social media, knew what I was doing, where I was. The numbers were always different, so blocking one didn't help. The messages weren't threatening, not outright. They were more like eerie reminders that I wasn't as far away from Kate as I thought. Hey, miss you. Where are you? Right now, who are you with? Sometimes just a word or two. Other times, little questions about my day, or who I'd been talking to. It wasn't just annoying, it was downright creepy. Like I was being hunted by a ghost who had built fake worlds just to trap people, then vanished only to pop back up from the shadows. The worst part, I had no idea why. What did she want from me? Why couldn't she just let me go? I tried to find her again, scouring the apps, social media, anything. But all the profiles were gone or locked down. It was like she wiped everything clean and slipped into some new identity I couldn't track. Still, the messages kept coming. New numbers, new accounts, always just out of reach. Always watching. Thought the whole thing left me messed up in ways I didn't expect. Meeting Kate was like stepping into a maze where the walls kept moving, and every door led to a new, weirder version of the same nightmare. You think you're dating someone real, but what if that person doesn't even exist? Or worse, what if they exist everywhere and nowhere at the same time? pulling you deeper into some game you never signed up for. It wasn't just about the fake profiles either. It was how she disappeared so suddenly and then never really left. How I could feel her presence, even when I didn't want to. Every time my phone buzzed with a new unknown number, I'd freeze, my heart racing. Was it her? Was it someone else? It didn't matter. I was caught in this weird limbo where nothing was normal anymore. Friends started noticing I was jumpy, distracted. I couldn't explain it to them without sounding paranoid. It was humiliating, feeling like I'd been played by someone who might not even be a real person. The paranoia seeped into other parts of my life. I stopped posting on social media. I changed my routines. I even switched phones once. But nothing stopped the messages. There were times I thought about going to the cops, but how do you explain something like this? I'm being harassed by someone who might be a ghost with dozens of fake identities. It sounded insane. And besides, no direct threats meant it was tricky to prove anything. I felt trapped in this bizarre stalking situation with no clear way out sometimes. I'd catch myself wondering about Kate's story. Why so many profiles? Why build all these fake worlds just to meet people and then vanish? Was it some sick game, a twisted experiment? Or maybe she had some darker reason I couldn't guess. Whatever it wasn't just a simple dating nightmare. It was a reminder of how online lives can be so easy to fake. How the person you think you know might be someone else entirely. And how, sometimes, the worst part isn't being lied to, it's being dragged into something you don't understand. Something that leaves you constantly looking over your shoulder. So yeah, that's what happened with Kate, the girl who wasn't really one person, who vanished but kept pulling me back like a ghost that refuses to stay dead. It's not like in movies where you get closure or answers. It's just this weird, endless waiting for the next message, the next identity, the next knock on the door from someone who's always one step ahead but nowhere you can touch. I'm still waiting. And maybe that's the worst part of all. I never thought I'd get so obsessed with someone's phone. Like I'd always been the kind of person who didn't care too much about what people hid behind their screens. But with Colin, it was different. From the start, he was always super private about his phone and social media. I mean, normal people might want to keep some things to themselves, right? But this was next level. Every time I casually asked to see something, maybe a funny meme or a message he was laughing at, he'd immediately shut down. Not just a no, but this weird tense vibe where he looked almost angry, like I'd crossed a line I wasn't supposed to dot at first. I tried to ignore it. Maybe Colin was just a little old-fashioned about privacy, or had some personal stuff he didn't want to share, but the more time passed, the more it started to eat at me. I'd catch him glancing at his phone and then quickly locking it when I walked into the room. He'd keep it on him, even when we were out, not letting it out of his sight. I started feeling like I was dating a mystery wrapped in a riddle, and that mystery wasn't the fun kind. One night we were hanging out at his place. He left his phone charging on the kitchen counter while he went to the bathroom, and it was one of those rare moments where I just couldn't stop myself. I picked it up, intending just to peek quickly. I thought maybe I'd find some harmless messages or funny texts. But what I found was way beyond anything I expected. His phone was locked with a password, obviously, but I'd always been kind of tech-savvy and managed to crack it. I felt terrible invading his privacy, but I was too curious and honestly kind of scared of what he was hiding. Once I got in, the first thing I did was open his messaging app. And right there, like a neon sign flashing danger, were conversations. With people I didn't know at all. It wasn't the usual chatting you expect between friends. These messages were dark, creepy, and disturbing in a way that made my stomach twist. Some of the conversations were about people names I had never heard, details about their lives, locations. It didn't sound like casual gossip or regular chatting. It was like Colin was tracking these people, talking about them with a kind of cold obsession. There were plans and mentions of watching, following, waiting. The more I read, the worse it got. One thread talked about someone's daily schedule with almost surgical precision. Like he was stalking them. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just a private guy. This was someone who was living a double life. someone who was involved in something seriously messed up. My heart was pounding, and I kept digging, scrolling through message after message, trying to piece together what this was about. The conversations were fragmented but clear enough to paint a scary picture. Colin was collecting information on people for some unknown, sinister purpose. What terrified me even more was the way he talked in these chats, cold, calculated, almost like he was playing a game. There was no empathy, no hesitation, just plans, observations, and a kind of pride in how much control he seemed to have. I wondered who these people were, why they didn't know he was watching them, and what he could possibly want from it all. I tried to close the app, put the phone back, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I needed to know more. I found photos sent between him and these strangers, images that didn't seem right. Some were taken without the person knowing, blurry shots from a distance, or pictures of things they owned. There was a whole side of Colin I had never imagined, one that made me want to run as far away as possible. But I was trapped. How do you just walk away from someone when they're this close? When they act normal, laugh with you, text you sweet things? It was like living with a stranger who wore a mask every day, hiding something dangerous underneath. I thought about confronting him but couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. What if he flipped out? What if this was just some messed up hobby and he'd try to hurt me? I wasn't sure I was safe, and honestly the fear was thick in the air every time he was around. Eventually, I decided to back off the phone and pretend like I never saw anything. I deleted all the messages I had opened, wiped any trace of my snooping. But the feeling didn't leave me. It lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. And every time Colin was on his phone, that knot in my stomach twisted tighter. After a while, I stopped trusting anything he said. I watched him from the corner of my eye, waiting for a slip, a mistake, something to confirm the nightmare I had found in his messages. And sometimes I caught at a glance, a whisper, a hesitation that made me want to scream and run at the same time. I never got the full picture, never figured out exactly what Colin was involved in, or why he was so obsessed with these strangers. What I do know is that some people carry dark secrets in their pockets, and sometimes those secrets don't just stay hidden, they watch you back. I left him eventually, but the memories of those messages, those cold words in the dark, stayed with me. And sometimes, when I hear a notification sound on my own phone, my heart still races, wondering if the shadows from Colin's world might reach out again. You think you know what a weird gift looks like until you get something from Christina. Seriously, if someone had told me that on the second date, this girl would hand me a necklace with her period blood in it, I probably would have laughed it off as a joke. But no, it happened. And it wasn't just some weird metaphor or some symbolic gesture you hear about in movies. It was real, messy, and way too personal to be anything but disturbing. I'm not exactly the kind of guy who's into romance at first sight or cutesy stuff. But when I met Christina, she seemed cool, different in a way that grabbed your attention without trying too hard. Our first date was nothing special, just a couple of drinks at this small downtown bar with funky lighting and bad music playing in the background. We talked about random stuff, movies, dumb high school memories, some weird food we both hated. Nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, you meet someone, you vibe, you hope for something more. That was me at the time. Then came the second date. She picked this old, slightly run-down cafe in the afternoon, the kind of place with creaky chairs and walls covered in old vinyl records. I thought it was cute, honestly. She was calm but had this strange energy, like she was holding back something. When we left, she stopped me outside, pulled out a small velvet pouch, and handed it over. She said it was a gift. I opened it later, back at my place, just messing around, thinking it'd be something simple, like a bracelet or a charm. Instead, inside was a tiny glass vial attached to a delicate silver chain. I blinked a few times, leaning closer, and then noticed the dark red stain inside the vial. It wasn't paint or some fake blood, it was real. And that's when it hit me, she told me later, in her own calm way, that it was her period blood. I didn't know what to say. It felt like the floor dropped under me, like some bizarre ritual I never signed up for. and she didn't seem embarrassed or shy about it, just matter of fact, like it was normal or even special. But for me, it was the opposite. I kept turning the vial around in my fingers, feeling a mix of confusion and this creeping, uncomfortable feeling crawling up my spine. I tried to shrug it off at first, telling myself it was just a weird gift, maybe some personal statement she wanted to share. But every time I looked at that necklace, it made me feel off, like I was carrying a secret I wasn't supposed to know. It stuck in my mind more than it should have. Over the next few days, things got stranger. Christina was intense about staying close, texting me weird things about blood, cycles, and how that necklace was supposed to connect us in a way I couldn't understand. It wasn't romantic in the usual sense, but more like she was pulling me into this weird world of hers. A world that felt dark and tangled. We hung out again, and I noticed she'd always wear the necklace, touching it like it was some kind of lifeline. The air between us started feeling heavier. At first I thought maybe it was me being overdramatic, but there was definitely something unsettling about how she talked about the necklace, almost like it gave her power or control. One night, she invited me over to her place. It was a small apartment with dim lighting, walls covered in strange art, mostly red, messy strokes, and abstract faces. The whole vibe felt like stepping into someone's private nightmare. She made dinner, and I tried to focus on the food. But my eyes kept drifting to that necklace hanging from her neck, the tiny vial catching the low light. Then she started talking about her past relationships, how she gave those guys something similar, some kind of token. She wasn't joking. The way she described it sent chills through me. Like this wasn't just a creepy phase or some artsy thing, it was something she did to hold on to people, to trap them somehow. The more I listened, the more I realized that the necklace wasn't just a gift. It was a symbol of control, possession, and suddenly, the weird gift didn't feel like a romantic gesture at all. It felt like a warning. From that point on, things spiraled. Christina got more intense, talking about cycles, rituals, and how the necklace linked us beyond the normal. She expected me to wear it, carry it around, like it was part of some twisted bond. I tried to back away, but she wouldn't let me. She'd get cold and distant, then suddenly clingy and overwhelming. The lines blurred, and the necklace was always there. A constant reminder that I was somehow tied to her in a way I didn't understand or want. I started feeling trapped, like I was living inside a nightmare where normal boundaries didn't exist anymore. The necklace became this heavy, suffocating thing around my neck, both literally and in my mind. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of something dark, something I couldn't escape. Eventually, I had to get rid of it. I left it in a dumpster one night, hoping that would be the end of it. But the memory didn't leave. The idea of someone carrying around their period blood like a trophy, like it was some kind of weapon, stuck with me. It made me question how well you can really know someone. How close is too close when it comes to sharing parts of yourself? And what happens when that closeness crosses a line you didn't even know existed? I never saw Christina again after that. But every now and then, when I pass by that old cafe or see a vial on a necklace in a shop window, my skin tightens. I remember the weight of that little glass bottle, the strange power it seemed to hold, and how something so personal can turn into something utterly terrifying without you even realizing it at first. Dating someone can be weird and wild, but some things, like a necklace filled with period blood, remind you there's a whole other level of strange out there, waiting to catch you off guard. I never thought a normal date could turn into something so messed up. Like you think you know a person after a few hangouts, but then you get invited over to their place and everything flips upside down. That's exactly what happened with Ben. At first, he seemed chill, funny in that sarcastic way, not too clingy, not too distant. We met through some dating app, nothing fancy, just swiping and chatting until something clicked. So when he asked me to come over one weekend, I thought, why not? It seemed like a normal next step. His apartment was on the edge of the city, in this old building with creaky floors and peeling paint. Not the nicest place, but not sketchy either. The hallway smelled like damp, and the flickering lights gave off this weird vibe, but I brushed it off. When he opened the door, I noticed a bunch of stuff right away, strange angles on the furniture. Too many mirrors, and this odd tension in the air. But I told myself I was just being picky. Once inside, I couldn't help but glance around. There were mirrors everywhere. Not just the usual ones in the bathroom or bedroom, but random ones in the living room and kitchen. And they weren't hanging on the walls like normal mirrors. Some were angled weirdly, reflecting corners or dark spots. The kind of mirrors that don't just show you your reflection, but seem like they're watching you back. That's when I started noticing other things. Small holes or dots on the walls, a tiny lens peeking out from a smoke detector, a screw that didn't quite match the others. I had this creeping suspicion, like the apartment was a trap, but I told myself I was imagining it. People hide cameras for dumb reasons all the time, right? Still, I kept scanning, and the more I looked, the more I saw. Ben was acting normal. Maybe a little too normal. He made coffee, offered me a seat, and talked about his job, but my eyes were glued to these weird setups. Then I found the worst, this large mirror in the hallway that looked like a regular mirror. But when I stood at the right angle, I could see the room behind it, like a two-way mirror. My heart started pounding because it hit me. He could watch me anytime he wanted. I didn't say anything. I pretended to relax, but inside, I was already planning how to get out. I had no idea how long he had been filming me without me knowing, or what he was doing with those videos. There was no way to tell if it was just for himself or if those creepy recordings were uploaded somewhere online. The whole time, I felt like an actor in some twisted movie, playing a part I never auditioned for. Every move I made was probably being recorded, and I had zero control over it. Ben laughed off my questions when I tried to ask about the weird setup. But the way he looked at me felt cold and calculating. Later, I found a drawer in the living room that was stuffed with SD cards, wires, and mini cameras. It was like a tech shop for spying. I panicked and grabbed my phone, ready to leave, but he blocked the door, his smile disappearing. I got out that night, but the thought that someone might have watched me without my permission made me sick. I never confronted him again, and I deleted all our chats. But the scary part is not knowing where those videos might have ended up. How many people could have seen me without me even realizing? Every mirror and every camera was a trap, and I was caught in it without a clue until it was too late. It's wild how something that starts out like a normal date can turn into this nightmare. Ben wasn't just a guy trying to get to know me. He was playing a game I didn't even know I was in. And the worst part, there's no way to know if it's over or if those creepy videos are still out there somewhere, watching, waiting, like the mirrors in his apartment. I remember sitting in my car afterward, heart pounding, trying to make sense of it all. I kept replaying every moment in my head, those weird angles of the mirrors, the tiny lenses hidden in everyday objects. How long had he been doing this? Had I been watched before, on other dates, or when I thought I was safe? It was overwhelming. Like I'd walked into some horror movie I hadn't auditioned for. I thought about calling the police, but what could I say? Hey, I think my date has a bunch of hidden cameras everywhere and might be spying on me. Would they take me seriously? And even if they did, what could they really do without concrete proof or a direct threat? I felt stuck in the days that followed. I kept looking over my shoulder, checking my phone obsessively. Every notification made my stomach twist. I kept wondering if someone else had access to those videos. Could they be floating around online? Somewhere. The idea made me feel exposed, violated in a way I hadn't anticipated. I deleted all the photos, changed my passwords, even considered moving to a new place. The paranoia crept into everything. I didn't want to trust anyone anymore. The thought of meeting someone new was terrifying. How many others out there were like Ben, hiding dark secrets behind a smile? Friends asked what happened, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the full story. It sounded insane, and I worried they'd think I was exaggerating or making it up, so I kept quiet, carrying the weight of that night alone. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to get pulled into something dangerous without seeing the warning signs. The mirrors weren't just mirrors, they were windows into my privacy being stolen. Ben wasn't just a guy on a date, he was someone who saw me as an object, a subject to be watched, recorded, and controlled. It's crazy how the places where You should feel safest your own home. Someone's apartment can turn into prisons or traps. That night with Ben taught me to trust my instincts, no matter how small the feeling is. Because sometimes, those little doubts are the only thing standing between you and a nightmare. Even now, years later, I catch myself double-checking my surroundings, feeling uneasy about mirrors or strange reflections. The fear sticks with you longer than you want. I hope sharing this helps someone else spot the signs before it's too late. So yeah, what was supposed to be a casual date ended up being one of the scariest experiences of my life. Ben's apartment wasn't just a place to hang out. It was a trap, carefully set with watching eyes that never blinked. And me, I was just the latest person caught in that invisible web, with no idea how many others had been there before, or how many might come after. I never thought I'd get caught up in something so messed up just from trying to have a normal date. You know how it goes: swipe right, text a bit, meet up, and hope for the best. That's what I thought when I met Chloe. She was cool at first, really chill, funny, and honestly, I thought we clicked. But then things took a sharp left turn, and before I knew it, I was dealing with police reports and accusations that made zero sense. It all started when she suddenly accused me of stalking her. And that was just the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. We met downtown, a casual coffee shop kind of vibe, and it felt easy. Nothing too intense, just two people hanging out and getting to know each other. After a couple of dates, things seemed fine. Then, out of nowhere, Chloe started acting strange, pulling away, avoiding meeting up, barely answering texts. At first, I thought maybe she was just busy or needed space. I didn't push, didn't blow up her phone, nothing. I even gave her room to breathe. But then, I started getting these weird messages. Accusations thrown at me like I was some creep who was following her every move. It was crazy because I hadn't been doing any of that. No stalking, no showing up uninvited, no creepy texts. I wasn't even trying to see her, honestly. But she was convinced, and she went straight to the police. One day, I got a call from an officer asking me to come in and talk. I was baffled. How did things get this out of hand? When I showed up, they told me Chloe had filed a complaint saying I was stalking her, sending threatening messages, and even showing up at her work. None of it was true, but I didn't know how to prove it either. They said they had her statements and some supposed evidence from her phone. I tried to explain my side, but the whole situation felt like I was already guilty in their eyes. I wasn't allowed to see the details of what she claimed at first. Just that I was under investigation. That hit me hard because I didn't know how to clear my name against someone who seemed dead set on ruining me. The weirdest part was how quickly the story spread at work and among my friends. Suddenly I was the stalker, the guy everyone whispered about. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, I started keeping track of where I was every day, trying to build some kind of timeline to prove I wasn't anywhere near her. I checked my phone records, my messages, even my social media. Nothing showed up that could be twisted into stalking. But Chloe's accusations didn't stop. She told the police about me showing up near her apartment and said I was watching her. None of it happened. I didn't even know where she lived. The cops tried to get her to explain, but she stuck to her story like it was gospel. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare where the truth didn't matter. The whole time I was scared that I'd lose my job, my reputation, everything just because some girl decided to lie. The police put me on some sort of watch list, and I had to stay away from places she mentioned, even if I had a legit reason to be there. What made it worse was the way Chloe acted like I was the crazy one. She'd block me on everything, then send me messages from new accounts, pretending she wasn't the same person. It was like she was playing some twisted game where she controlled how I was seen by everyone else. People I barely knew started asking questions, whispering behind my back, all based on a story that wasn't true. I tried to reach out to her to clear things up, but she'd just get angry or vanish for days. When I finally did manage to talk, it was like she was waiting to catch me in a lie or make me mess up. I kept thinking there had to be some reason for all this. Was she scared, paranoid, or just trying to hurt me? Nothing made sense, and I felt powerless. My friends tried to help, but most of them kept their distance. It's tough when the person everyone thinks is dangerous is you. Even the police acted like they were stuck between believing a victim and the reality I was trying to show them. I wasn't allowed near her, but I didn't even want to be. I just wanted this to end. Months passed, and the case dragged on. Chloe's accusations got more intense, and at one point, she even said I was sending her gifts and following her friends. Again, no proof, just her word. The cops took it seriously, but when they checked my phone and social media, they found nothing. I was clean, but that didn't stop the suspicion. The worst moment was when I got called to court for a hearing. Sitting there, listening to someone I barely knew paint me as a threat, was one of the most surreal things I've ever been through. The judge asked questions, looked at evidence, but it felt like a show. I was just waiting for it all to blow over, or for someone to realize how messed up the whole thing was. By the time it ended, Chloe had disappeared, no forwarding address, no phone number. She vanished without a trace, leaving me with the mess she made. The charges were dropped eventually, but my life wasn't the same. I lost friends, my job got shaky, and I spent months trying to clear my name. Looking back, it's wild how someone can just accuse you of something so serious, and the whole system can spin out of control without checking the facts. I didn't stalk anyone. I wasn't dangerous. But just being named that was enough to turn my world upside down. Chloe never apologized or tried to explain why she did it. She just left. Now, whenever I meet someone new or try to date, there's this voice in the back of my head reminding me how fragile things can get, how fast a story can change, and how powerless you are if someone decides to ruin you. That's the real horror, when your own life turns into something you don't recognize, and the person who started it all disappears like a ghost. You ever have one of those moments where everything feels like it's clicking, and you think, yeah, this is it, this person is different? That's how I felt with Devin at first. We started dating, things were chill, and he always acted like the guy who had your back, you know? But looking back, I realize how wrong I was about him. The whole thing hit me like a brick after a trip we took together, one I ended up paying for completely. While he kept making excuses about money, then the real kicker came a month later, when he went on this crazy expensive guy's trip and paid for everything himself. It was like someone flipped a switch, and I was left wondering how I didn't see it before. So, Devin and I had been dating for a few months when I suggested we go on a holiday together. Nothing crazy, just a week somewhere to get away from everything. He was all about it, but kept dropping hints about being tight on cash, like constantly saying how he didn't have money for this or that, how bills were piling up, how he was scraping by. I didn't think much of it at first, because sometimes people really do have money problems, and I figured I could handle it. I was ready to split costs or even take the lead since I was working full-time. Planning the trip was mostly on me because Devin said he didn't have much to put in. Flights, hotel, food, I ended up covering everything without a second thought. I mean, it wasn't cheap, but I wanted it to be good for both of us. The first few days felt nice, even though Devin wasn't really pulling his weight financially. He would complain about prices, or suggest cheap places, but never really offered to pay for anything. I kept thinking maybe he was embarrassed or going through something tough. The trip was beautiful, don't get me wrong. We explored cities, ate at places I picked out, and stayed at this cozy Airbnb I booked. But the whole time Devin's "I can't afford this" line kept coming up. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it since I was happy to treat him. But deep down, it felt off, like I was being used without realizing it. But I told myself, maybe it's just how he is. Maybe he's careful with money. When we got back, I honestly thought we'd be closer. But then things started to feel weird. Devin suddenly went quiet about plans for us. He stopped mentioning anything about going out or doing stuff together. I figured he was busy, so I gave him space. Then one day, I stumbled on his social media by accident, and it was like a punch to the gut. There he was, all over the place with photos from this insane vacation, jets, fancy dinners, and crazy nightlife. Only, this trip was with his friends, and it happened just a month after ours. What hit me was that he was paying for everything. The flights, the clubs, the expensive hotels, it wasn't cheap at all. And here I was, thinking he was broke, handing over thousands on our trip while he was out splurging with his buddies. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How was it that he couldn't afford to pay for our holiday, but now he was balling out with his friends? I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe he was just trying to get back on his feet, or had some other expenses I didn't know about. But every picture, every story on his feed made it harder to believe. When I finally asked him about it, his reaction was something else. He got defensive, angry even, saying stuff like it wasn't my business, or accusing me of not trusting him. But trust wasn't the issue. I was confused, hurt, and honestly kind of embarrassed that I had been the one paying for everything when he clearly had money. It felt like I'd been played, like I wasn't even a priority. After that, things spiraled. Devin kept acting like nothing was wrong, but kept avoiding any talk about money or future plans. Meanwhile, his social media was full of pictures from his lavish weekend trips, expensive gadgets, and nights out. I even found out from a mutual friend that he'd paid for a big boys trip with his friends the very same month we got back from our holiday. The guy who said he couldn't afford a simple meal suddenly had no problem dropping cash on flashy vacations. I started putting the pieces together. He probably never needed the money excuse. He just didn't want to spend it on me, or worse. Maybe he never intended to. It was like I was his personal ATM, and when it came to his friends, he had no problem showing off and spending. The whole thing felt disgusting. I can't tell you how many nights I lay awake, replaying the trip in my head, wondering how I missed the signs. How did I let myself believe someone who was so quick to ask for help, but so ready to disappear when it came to me? The jealousy, the anger, the betrayal, it all mixed together into this heavy feeling that stuck around long after the trip ended. What made it worse was how he brushed it off like it was nothing, like I was just being crazy or jealous. But I wasn't. I just wanted to be treated like someone worth spending money on, not just a walking wallet. That feeling of being used but not realizing it until it's too late is awful. You don't want to admit it because it means trusting someone was a mistake. I stopped answering his messages after a while, blocked him on everything. I didn't want to hear excuses or lies anymore. The weird part, he never asked for anything back or tried to explain, just disappeared like he never cared. Meanwhile, I was left sorting through the mess of my own feelings, and the memory of that trip that was supposed to be special, but ended up being a twisted version of betrayal. Sometimes, when I scroll through old photos, I see the places we went, the smiles I forced, and it's hard not to cringe. What I thought was a great time ended up being the moment I realized how messed up people can be when they want to take and never give back. Devin taught me that the worst kind of betrayal isn't someone cheating or lying, it's the silent one, where they take your trust, your money, and vanish without a care. So yeah, that trip, it wasn't just a holiday. It was the start of one of the most disturbing experiences I've had in dating, and the weirdest part, he still owes me, and somehow, that feels like the smallest problem in the mess he left behind. You ever think you're dating someone who's totally into you, only to realize you're just one name on a long list? That's what happened with Stacy. I mean, at first, everything felt pretty normal, like we were vibing and actually clicking. But then, little things started adding up. She was always texting, sometimes hiding her phone, and making excuses about why she couldn't hang out or why she was busy. I figured everyone's got a life, right? But it hit me way harder than I expected when I found out she wasn't just talking to a few other people. She was basically juggling a whole squad of guys, and I was just one of the players in her game. So here's the deal. Stacy and I met through some friends at a party. She was funny, smart, and had this way of making you feel like the only person in the room. We started texting, hanging out, and things seemed cool at first. I wasn't the type to rush into anything, and honestly, I thought she was different from the usual drama I'd seen in other relationships. But Stacy had this habit of being just out of reach sometimes, like she'd disappear for hours or days without any warning, and when she came back, she acted like nothing was up. I brushed it off as busy life stuff, thinking maybe she was working crazy hours or had family issues. But then the texting started to feel off. I'd catch her glancing at her phone all the time, switching screens when I walked in the room, or laughing at messages she quickly hid when I looked. I wasn't even trying to spy or anything, but the weird vibe was impossible to ignore. It wasn't like the flirty, harmless texts you see in normal relationships. These were secretive, low-key, obsessive messages that didn't add up. One night, Stacy invited me over to her place. I thought it would be a chill, regular hangout, just some snacks and a movie. But the whole night, her phone was buzzing nonstop. She kept slipping out to reply, and the way she acted was just different. Like when I tried to ask what was up, she got defensive, like I was being clingy or paranoid. That's when the doubts started to creep in. Seriously, I didn't want to be that guy who jumps to conclusions, so I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. But then, one of those nights, I ended up on her phone accidentally, of course. I saw the notifications pop up and couldn't help myself. What I found was worse than anything I imagined. There were messages from multiple guys, all flirty, some even planning to meet up. The way she talked to them was like she was playing a game, dropping just enough attention to keep everyone hooked, but never really giving herself to anyone. It was like I was just one name in a whole list, a placeholder she used when she was bored or lonely. I kept scrolling and found pictures. She had sent to some of these guys pictures she'd never sent to me. And then there were the texts about how she was juggling all of them, how she enjoyed the thrill of not being tied down. The worst part, I wasn't even special to her. She didn't hide the fact that she was seeing others. She just hid it from me. Like in her mind, it wasn't cheating because she never gave me the full truth. But for me, it felt like a punch in the gut. It got worse when I realized she was planning another date the same weekend she promised to hang out with me. The energy she gave off when she was around me suddenly made sense. The fake smiles, the distracted talks, the rushed goodbyes. She wasn't just careless. She was intentionally playing me. I kept thinking about all the times I stayed up waiting for her texts, canceled plans to see her, or made an effort to be there, only to be a side act in her story. It felt like she was collecting people, like it was some weird competition too. See how many guys she could string along without getting caught. I'm not even exaggerating when I say she had names and dates planned out weeks in advance. Always one step ahead. One day I confronted her. Well, not exactly confrontation. It was more me laying all the weird facts out, and hoping she'd admit something. But Stacy flipped the script on me, acting like I was the one being obsessive. Like I was the problem for not trusting her. It was like she had rehearsed this act, knowing exactly how to dodge every question and make me doubt myself. I started feeling crazy, even though deep down I knew the truth was staring me in the face. After that, I stopped texting her as much, stopped chasing her, but she didn't stop with the games. I'd see her online, posting pictures with new guys, tagging locations I'd never heard of. I even found out from a friend that she was bragging about how many guys she had going at the same time, like it was some twisted badge of honor. What creeped me out the most wasn't even the cheating, it was how cold and calculated she was about the whole thing. Like people were just pawns to her, not humans with feelings. She had no problem stringing people along, lying, and making promises she had zero intention of keeping. She wasn't messy or careless. She was deliberate. I remember one night sitting alone, scrolling through her latest stories, and feeling completely numb. How do you deal with someone who's been so fake, who made you feel like you mattered when, all along, you were just one option among many? It wasn't just heartbreak. It was this weird mix of anger, betrayal, and disgust that made me question everything about trust. So yeah, Stacy's story isn't just about cheating. It's about someone who treats relationships like a game, where feelings don't matter and people are just pawns. The way she kept multiple guys on the hook, playing them for attention and control, it was honestly disturbing. And me, I was just another name on her list, someone she could easily replace without a second thought in the end. I learned that sometimes the person you think is yours is actually playing you. And the scary part is, they might not even see anything wrong with it. Stacy didn't need to hide her lies because in her world, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just winning.